Good morning.
Good morning.
It is Tuesday, September 20th. It's no longer International Talk Like a Pirate Day.
No, we didn't really talk like pirates much yesterday.
No, we don't. We did not. Except for the fact that, generally speaking, pirates actually spoke just like everybody else in their era.
So maybe with slightly cruder language.
Especially in the performance of their piratiness, yes. But
that was sailors in general. I mean,
sailors, and there's a reason cursing like a
sailor is a thing. Yeah.
Yes, it's fascinating to read C.S. Forrester's series on Horatio Hornblower, because when it was written, while there are occasional profanities in the book, there really aren't very many at all. But there are multiple spaces because of the era in which the book was written for it to be able to be published. Books were written, be published, circulated, and such. You couldn't do a whole lot, but there are so many places where it's like cursing, blasphemies that Hornblower weren't even sure had been, were in, such and such a, bosun's mate was, using blasphemies that Hornblower weren't even sure were possible.
Well, and this is why you prefer like Hornblower over Master and Commander, because
also Master and Commander is so dang wordy. Somebody said it's like reading it is as if Jane Austen wrote novels about the sea, and I'm just like, if that's the way Jane Austen wrote, you can forget it. I got no interest.
She is wordy.
Very wordy. According to Karen Swallow Prior, the wordiness is intended to cover up that in the era in which it was written, you'd recognize that what's going on is you're talking around all of the actual important things. Mm-hmm. And so you have this long, extended discussion of the dinner party, because you're not going to discuss all of the adultery that went on after the dinner party.
Fair enough.
So that's why you spend 74 pages discussing this weird standoffish conversation at the dinner party, and it's because the people having the weird standoffish conversation at the dinner party are actually having a fling after the party, but nobody knows it.
Fair enough.
This is what I appreciate, despite the fact that he is also excessively wordy, about Dumas and the French. I also appreciate their translators and abridgers, and that is The French, like the French were just like, and then this happened, and you go, whoa! But that helped sell magazine copy. So
direct versus indirect communication, going back to the
cultural
intelligence lectures. Yeah.
You want to? Let's do this. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
I am not the captain of my own destiny, nor even of this new day, and so I renounce a new all claim to my own life and desires. I am only yours, O Lord. Lead me by your mercies through these hours, that I might spend them well, not in harried pursuit of my own agendas, but rather in good service to you. Teach me to shepherd the small duties of this day with great love, tending faithfully those tasks you place within my care, and tending with patience and kindness the needs and hearts of those people you place within my reach. Nothing is too hard for you, Lord Christ. I deposit now all confidence in you that whatever these waking hours bring, my foundations will not be shaken. At day's end, I will lay me down again to sleep, knowing that my best hope is well kept in you. In all things your grace will sustain me. Bid me follow, and I will follow. Amen. So, you want to shake your perception of yourself and the world. Do two things. Read a couple of good books on the Enneagram about personality. The Road Back to You and The Story of You. Read those two books by Ian Morgan Cron and Susan Stabile. Suzanne Stabile? Suzanne.
That's Suzanne, yeah.
Yeah, Suzanne. Suzanne Stabile. And then pick up and the audiobook lectures, or the audio lectures that go with it. Read David Livermore's book, Leading with Cultural Intelligence, and listen to the series that's on Audible that's him lecturing about the cultural dynamics and cultural dimensions. And you start going,
First of all, it explains a lot about why you might struggle with different cultures. But it can even explain individual people and why, he's talking on a cultural level and saying that while individuals within the culture don't automatically fit all these markers, this is the overall approach of this culture.
Mm-hmm.
But it also helps you to understand people better and why certain people are going to approach life differently than you, because you might fall on one end of the spectrum or even in the middle, and somebody else will fall on one extreme or the other. And so,
well, and the reference there at the beginning of this video, direct and indirect communication. So some cultures, let's just talk about that.
Okay.
Some cultures, and therefore some people, are what are considered direct communication cultures. And actually, the predominant culture of the U.S. is a direct communication culture.
You say it like it is. You don't
Exactly.
play around the truth. You go ahead and, and we honor that. We value that. People being honest, not necessarily bluntly. We do have ranges of it. We want people to be kind, and other people say, no, you've just got to be blunt and say it like it is. And, so we have different levels of it, but we are direct.
Direct communicators. And then there are other cultures that the other side of that, and everything should be, you should see it as a range, a spectrum, and that is what's called indirect communication, where you don't always say the immediate thing, or the other terminologies for it are high context and low context. A low context communication culture we would also call direct, and a high context we would call indirect. A high context culture, there are certain things that they're going to assume that you know, or assume that you wouldn't do certain things. And so, for example, in giving directions, the most low context direct way of giving directions somewhere is, we would also talk about it being technical. Go down, go 500 yards, or go 6 blocks, make a left. You'll see a McDonald's on your right. And after you pass the McDonald's, go to the next traffic light and make a right.
And we'd include street names.
We would include street names
specific.
To be very specific. But you can even see when you start getting, you can see subculture when you start getting to like small towns where you start subbing out. You don't call street names like in CrossFit. They don't call Martin Luther King Drive Martin Luther King Drive. They call it the truck route because it's the bypass. And it was the bypass before it got named MLK Drive. It was the truck route to keep trucks from going through downtown. So everybody calls it the trucker. Well, you look at the map, you go, what road is that?
Well, like in Memphis, the flyover.
Memphis, the flyover. Atlanta, there's a section referred to as Spaghetti Junction. Mm-hmm. So you have some of those references. Or you go down to where, where the old McDonald's was, which is, by the way, JB's Burgers and Wings, great place in CrossFit. You go down to the old McDonald's, and what you'll see is that Atwood's is there in the old Walmart. And so you go to the old McDonald's, you go past the old Walmart, and that's where the high school is. Except that's the new high school, not the old high school. Mm-hmm.
That's context.
You're starting to add context where you have to understand it. A high context culture won't even have those. It'll be, you go a little bit that way, and then you go that way. Or when maybe you're trying to do a background check on a person. Low context culture. Did Bob ever work for you? Yes, Bob worked for you. Bob worked for me from March of 1984 to June of 1987. Was Bob a good employee? Yes, he hit these markers. High context culture. Bob ever work for you? Sometime. Far in the past.
Yes, yeah.
Was he a good employee?
Bob had a lot of really great qualities about him. He really interacted well with people. Everybody liked Bob.
Was Bob a good employee?
Well, like I said, everybody liked Bob.
Bob wouldn't shut up and do his job.
You have to. You have to know how to pick up inferences. You have to know how to read between the lines. Mm-hmm. And in some, we encountered this when I was growing up in Jordan. Jordanians, they wouldn't give you bad news. They just could not communicate bad news, even if you went to the doctor. A doctor would have a hard time coming out and telling you you've got cancer. And so Jordan, that culture, you had to make a lot of inferences. You had to learn, you had to be able to read the context. They were very indirect, and very much that you had to read between the lines. You had to interpret the context of where you were. They were never going to come out and tell you something, especially if it was negative. So it's very, very important to understand how the culture worked, to understand body language and unwritten rules, and to understand the context that you were going into. You couldn't just walk in as a Westerner and expect everything to just be laid out in front of you clearly. You had to learn the context and the culture if you were going to understand what was going on. And so that's the culture that I grew up in, where you had to make a lot of inferences. You had to pick up on clues.
A clue?
A clue.
Gesundheit. So now, it sounds, and because we especially as Americans, very much value the direct and the low context, it sounds like the other is deceptive, but it's really not. It's a matter of priority, and it's also a matter of understanding how people are communicating with you. For example, you may or may not be somebody who likes sarcasm, appreciates sarcasm, feels that sarcasm is a good thing. You may feel that sarcasm is evil, and I mean, if so, that's fine with me. Well, actually, but it's not. Sarcasm is a great example of it, of where you go into. We go to Walmart, and the last can of what we want is on the top shelf, 18 inches back from the edge. And so it's, I'm not sure Shaq could reach it for you. But if Ann were to look at me and say, "Can you reach that?" I'm going to look at her and say, "Oh yeah, sure." Did I lie to her? Well, if you really want to press the technicality, I did. But because of the family culture of knowing how we communicate, sometimes with a little bit of snark and sarcasm, then no, I didn't. She understood the truth because she understood the cultural rules of that conversation. Oh, can you just? Oh yeah, that's no problem at all. And so it's not as deceptive as you think it is. You just may not understand that culture. And in the same way, a direct or low context communication style is not as rude as you may think it is. It may just be someone's culture. Now, how do we learn our culture?
By participating in it. Well, and learning you mentioned what's valued a little while ago, and I know we need to wrap this up so I can go to school, but what we value, for example, a direct culture is going to value truth and facts. Mm-hmm. An indirect culture is more likely to value relationships and the ability to maintain those relationships without harming another person. That doesn't mean that we don't value relationships as Westerners. It just means that we believe that relationships are built through directness, direct. And so you've got to interact with the culture. Growing up in Jordan, we never would have learned that culture if we hadn't developed relationships with Jordanians. If we had just stayed around expats, especially the Americans and Europeans, we never would have learned how to make those inferences and how to live in an indirect culture, indirect high context culture. So we had to actually get to know Jordanians.
Well, and one of the classic illustrative questions that we tend to throw out there about, truth and such. Does this shirt make me look fat?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in an indirect culture, you would, or a high context culture, you would respond with, "You always look wonderful, and have I mentioned how great your shoes are? And the pants look great." And the implication there is, I'm not going to tell you the shirt makes you look fat, but I'm also not going to tell you the shirt doesn't look quite right. Perhaps I might say, I'm not sure that the colors of the shirt match the pants. Jeff Foxworthy, classically in a comedic fashion said, "No, it's not the shirt that makes you look fat. It's the fat that makes you look fat." But we don't, there's one of those questions where truth, relationship, is there a better way to navigate it? And we pick up our culture, what we value, we learn that. That's not a classroom learning subject. Although what we learn and experience in formal education does shape part of it. It's also the way your family is. It's the entertainment and cultural choices that you make, the music that you listen to. People who listen to country music communicate different than people who listen to rock music.
And
Why?
people who listen to both are just confused.
Yes. Why? Because you learn culture differently. You learn communication differently. You learn those styles. So anyway, just be aware of that. Most people aren't trying to be rude. Most people are trying to communicate, but because of the ways that we pick up culture from things like entertainment, somebody who grew up watching Law and Order, and that was their every night TV show, or were law shows, crime dramas, procedural dramas, picked up very much a strong fact orientation. If you spend all your time watching, comedic, sitcoms and comedies, you lean more relational. It can actually be shaped by you. The TV you watch shapes you. The movies you watch shape you. The dinosaurs that eat you shape you. Jurassic Park. Here we go.
Dinosaurs.
All right. Why don't you try that one?
Psalm 6. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger. Do not discipline me in your wrath. Be gracious to me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are shaking. My whole being is shaken in terror. And you, Lord, how long? Turn, Lord, rescue me. Save me because of your faithful love. For there is no remembrance of you in death. Who can thank you in Sheol? I am weary from my groaning. With my tears I dampen my bed and drench my couch every night. My eyes are swollen from grief. They grow old because of all my enemies. Depart from me, all evildoers, for the Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord has heard my plea for help. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be ashamed and shake with terror. They will turn back and suddenly be disgraced. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the ways you creatively made us and made us different. I pray that we will learn well what it means to interact with other people and to build relationships with them, and bridging the gaps between us. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Alexa, turn off the ring light. Or no. Oh, she got it. Yay.